Well, the big thing to point to, and I think there's going to be a lot of introspection and finger pointing among Democrats, is how they went about selecting their nominee. It was um, not conventional, to say the least, to stand behind in an effectively an uncontested primary season behind an incumbent president who then you abandon at the final hour and replace with the vice president who was the natural pick in some ways, but there wasn't so much as a moment of introspection between him stepping down and the party rallying behind her. Um, Even though in 2020 she ran what was widely regarded as a lackluster campaign, and it isn't clear what her core kind of base of supporters, what it looks like. And I think there'll be a lot of, as I said, a lot of finger pointing about not just towards people, but also towards process. Just how was this allowed to happen? And what needs to happen going further to avoid this catastrophe from Democrats' point of view.
I think in retrospect, one of her biggest challenges wasn't about her. It was about the fact from the start you were running a candidate who was tied to a deeply unpopular administration. And once you see that, and that made it hard for her to position herself as the candidate of change, you will ask what made him unpopular, and why were his economic policies doing poorly, and immigration policies, even when there's metrics that show he's quite successful. So I think that conversation is going to happen. And then there's also going to be the conversation of why didn't he open the door earlier on to primaries, caucuses, or even her running, by just running, governing for one term and being cognizant of his own limitations with age. All of that conversation is definitely coming, and it will impact his legacy. I think a president who did a lot will be also remembered for a president who was part of opening the door to what many Democrats consider a pretty radical conservative regime. There's also a reaction still about sexism, about race toward a female black presidential candidate. I think as a historian, it's hard to escape the idea that that was part of what went wrong too. Yeah, I mean, I actually think in retrospect her campaign was pretty strong and pretty flawless, and within a short amount of time, and dealing with the fact she was running as part of an administration that was deeply unpopular. The way that all came together, and I don't think there were many mistakes, I think overall wasn't her campaign. So it was either about how people perceive the administration, which is tied to the campaign, but it's not the campaign itself, factors about her disconnected from how she performs, or these other issues which loom large in the electorate.
No matter who we are or where we start out, is why I am here to say, while I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign.
Some people who lose become pariahs within their party, and the party doesn't want to have anything to do with them, or feature them at least, for fear it will cause them political fallout. You've had failed candidates who disappear. Michael Dukakis in 1988 is an example. You have some, like Hubert Humphrey, who actually get back into politics. He went back into the Senate and still remain a voice, not in presidential politics, but on Capitol Hill and in liberal organizations. And then you have someone like Richard Nixon, who lost in 1960 and then runs and wins the presidency 8 years later. So I think with the history, there's really different paths someone can take, and it's hard to know. I mean, a lot of Democrats are going to be very angry right now and frustrated, and they will look at her as part of the problem that unfolded. But I think a lot also feel she ran a pretty formidable campaign and emerged as an interesting figure that the Democrats don't clearly have someone comparable. So I don't think it's inevitable she kind of fades away from the political scene. I think just politically, in terms of the short term, I do think a lot of Democrats are going to think that way. They will not entirely blame her for how this unfolded. And all you need to do is look at the early exit polls, which were showing kind of very deep disapproval, not for her, but for Biden, and disapproval with the state of the country. And when you have polls like that, which are about the incumbent, which is not her, she's not the president, I think it's hard not to see how she was tied down in many ways by his reputation. And you could imagine her running in a different configuration than 2020 or 2024, where given what she did and how far she got the numbers really quickly from where they had fallen, she could be stronger. So there's ways in which she can remake herself. Will she? I don't know. But I can see a path.